Welcome to another episode of Real People, Real Stories, where we provide you with compelling tales from everyday people just like you. I'm your host, John Wendell Adams, author of the novels Betrayal and PayBack, along with the soon-to-be-released novel, Ruthless. You can always find me by going to john@johnwendelladams.com. So for the next 23 minutes, let's get to today's guest.
If you want anything bad enough, you got to work for it. Stick with the truth and do what you're assigned to do.
Hey, Alec.
Hi, John. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. It's great to see you.
Yeah, it's great to be seen, John.
Oh, there you go. That sounds just like the Alec I know. I'm so glad that you decided to come hang out with us on Real People, Real Stories. I'm looking forward to chatting with you.
Well, thank you. Likewise.
You and I had an opportunity to really talk about what I think is a real compelling story of Alec Childress. And so tell me, like I don't know, but tell me who you are, where you live in the country, and what you do.
Well, John, I am Alec Childress, and I live in Skokie, Illinois, and I am retired from construction after 46 years and 6 months. Retired in 2005, and now I'm a crossing guard for the last 16 years in Wilmette at the corner of 9th and Lake.
Wow. You got it down to the years and the months. Man, that's great. One of the things that I know about you is that you grew up in Mississippi. Share with me when and where you were born and what it was like working in the fields with your father. Apparently, there's a very significant thing that happened to you when you were 14. So share that with me, if you would.
I was born October 10th, 1939, Route 1, Box 134, Ware, Mississippi. It was a gravel road but that was our mailbox number. When I was 3 years old, if I may, my dad took me every place he went, whether it was to the fields or whether it was to the woods. We didn't have electricity or running water. When we wasn't in the field, when it would rain or something, we'd cut wood, cut firewood, and our stove wood for Mama to cook in the stove, and the firewood was for the fireplace.
Right.
And that's what we would do when we couldn't plow. But when we would go to the field, I wasn't tall enough as a little kid, as you can imagine, to reach the plow handles. Dad would have me walk beside him and drive the mule. And when we would get to the end of the row, we'd have to turn around and head back. But my job at that time was to drive the mule and watch him plow. Yeah.
Okay.
Where I could reach the plow handles. Now I knew what plowing was all about and how to do it, except when I would hit a root in the field and the plow would throw me down to the ground and he'd just say, "Get up, boy, you're not hurt." And so I'd get up and get right back at it.
I have to tell you, Alec, you're detailing a part of life that I have never experienced, my friend. So I appreciate you sharing that. But and then what happened?
As I grew older and learned the plowing and the cutting of the wood and the milking of the cows and feeding of the horses and things, one day Dad took me down to the barn and put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "Son, you can handle it now. So I'm going up north and make another home for us. And when I get settled, I'll send for you all. Meanwhile, you take care of your mom, your sisters and brothers, and the livestock, and take care of the field. I know you can handle it." I was 14 years old.
Wow, that was a lot of responsibility to put on a 14-year-old. How did you feel when he told you that?
Pretty good. I felt like he knew I could handle it. That's like he said. I felt like because he had taught me well along the years. And even though I didn't think about how young I was, I just thought about I had a responsibility and it was my job to do what my father had confidence that I could do.
Why is it that your father felt like it was important for him to leave Mississippi and go to make another life, a different life for you and your mom and your siblings in the North, as you call it?
In Mississippi, making a living was hard. You was constantly scratching from the dirt, so to speak.
Sure.
And of course, we lived in a society where we lived in Mississippi, where your opportunities very few. As was said by Martin Luther King, you were always scratching where you didn't itch and laughing when you know nothing funny. And my dad, he was a man of his word, but he just didn't like being demanded, so to speak. In other words, you couldn't stand as a man. You had to always reduce yourself when you was in the presence of others. And if I must say, in the presence of our white counterparts in Mississippi.
I see.
That's why Dad didn't want his children, the best he could, raised in that environment forever.
So his idea was to go to the North, establish a new life for you and your brothers and sisters and your mom.
That was Dad's idea. And he couldn't do that until he had someone that could take the reins and go on with the farm, providing for mom and for the kids and for all of us until I grew. When I got to be 14, he says, well, this boy is ready because I've raised him to be responsible. John, I tell you, when he left me at 14, he didn't just leave me in charge of the farm. See, there were a lot of white merchants that I was going to have to deal with as a Black African-American young boy, but as a man.
Right.
And he felt that my mannerism, my work ethic could handle that, could deal with the people and raise the crops that we grew.
Well, in some cultures, particularly the Jewish culture, at 13, you go through a set of rituals, and on the other side of that, you are officially a man. So at 14, it's obvious that your dad put a lot of faith and confidence in you. I guess the question I would ask is, how long was it before you and your family moved to the North? And where in the North did you move to?
It was 2 years. My mom ran the farm, a 165-acre cotton farm, and corn and cane and peanuts and potatoes and everything that we raised. And we moved. I was 16 years old. It was 2 years when Daddy said, well, I'm set now and I got a place. And we moved to Evanston, Illinois, 1711 Dodge Avenue in Evanston, Illinois.
Boy, it's amazing to me how you remember all these addresses, man. That's great. But go on.
Yeah, and anyway, now I'm 16 years old, John, if I may, and we moved to Evanston. Now I had another year to go in school. I was a senior and I was going to be enrolled at Evanston Township High School.
Yes.
They had me take a test for 2 days because coming from the South, we were, the stigma that was attached to us that we were not smart, I should say, as the children in the North.
Sure.
I had to take a test for 2 days to prove that I was qualified to be a senior. My mother said to me, there was 3 kids younger than me. And John, she said to me, son, we cannot afford to send you to school.
Yes.
You can't afford your books, your lunch, or your clothes, but you will go to school.
Right.
So you figure out how you're going to pay for it. Now I'm 16, but there was this responsibility that had been put up on me at 14 that my mom didn't have no question about whether or not I couldn't find a way to pay my way. And so I went about getting a job at the high school for my lunch, job at Arlington Hotel downtown Evanston to work and buy my books and clothes, and then come home at midnight after busting tables all evening and getting my homework and be in school the next morning, same routine. So it was the responsibility that was put up on me from 14 to 16, and now we're into, another responsibility situation.
I mean, so you're working at school in order to get your lunch, and then you have to go and work at a hotel until midnight,
Exactly.
And then get home and do all of your homework so you're ready to go to school the next day. Yeah, how did that make you feel?
Once again, it was hard, but the way I was raised, you didn't ask questions when mom and dad said, this is how it has to be. You did it.
Got it.
Therefore, I didn't feel sorry for myself. I feel like it was hard. I felt that this is just another part of life that I have to attack and attach myself to in order to move ahead. This is the way it's got to be.
Sure.
My dad always said, John, nothing comes to a sleeper but a dream.
Nothing comes to a sleeper but a dream. I love that.
There's no time for sleeping. You got to go to work.
Got it. So what happened? What happens next?
Well, I graduated in 1957 from Everson Township High School. And my mother said to me, son, are you going to college? I had been accepted at Chicago Teachers College. And she said, are you going to college, son? I said, no, ma'am. She said, okay, your rent starts today. Said that your rent will be $10 a week.
Yes.
And I'll be expecting it every week. Don't know freeloaders live in this house. And my answer to my mother was, yes, ma'am. And I went to work at the Arlington Hotel, and then from there to Northwestern University. And then I got word that there was a job opening at a company called K-Sun Corporation in Niles, Illinois, 6200 Grosse Pointe Road in Niles, Illinois, as an office boy. And I went there and told the man I wanted to apply for the job. I understood that it was an opening as an office boy. And he said, well, we have one. I said, no, he quit yesterday. And I got the word in the street that he quit. He said, well, then you hired. And so I filled out an application and they hired me.
Wow.
Yeah, and I worked as an office boy, cleaning desks, mopping floors, emptying waste paper baskets, running errands. And there was a group of guys that was working in the yard there and running drill rigs, and a group of white guys there, and they used to call me the washwoman. Here come that washwoman. Well, you know, I didn't like that, but nevertheless, I was needed a job, and I had to work. I had a goal that I wanted to reach in life, and that's to be employed. I learned in Mississippi that you have to put up with some things sometimes.
Well, how did that make you feel when they called you that?
Well, it didn't make me feel good. It was an insult, is what it was.
Sure.
But nevertheless, they wasn't feeding me. So I had to look there, in other words, people say I had to turn the other cheek.
Sure.
And just keep doing what I was told to do and what I was hired to do. But in the process, the owner, whose name was Kirk Becker, he owned a company, lived in Wilmette. He told the yard superintendent, I want you to make Alec Childress the yard foreman. And he said to Kirk, I called him Mr. Becker, said, who's going to work for him? And Mr. Becker's response was, if they work here, they'll work for him.
Wow.
Yeah, so, I had some guys that said they wouldn't work for me, and they had a name for this guy that wasn't very pleasant. So we're going to work for him. Well, you can't work here then. You got to move on. Anyway, I worked as a yard foreman, loading trucks, pulling out equipment that the guys would give a list that they needed on the job. I was running a crane, John.
Yes.
In order to run a crane, you had to be in the 150 operating engineers, which still exists today. My salary, John, was $4.50 an hour. The welder's salary in the shop was $4.25. And they said to the business agents, if Alec is going to make 25 cents more than we won't sign up. We won't let you in here.
Wow.
And they came out and talked to me and said, hey, the shop guys, which was all white, won't sign up this union if you get 25 cents more than they do. Will you take 25 cents less than your wage in the union so we can sign this place up? And I said, yes, I will.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So we signed up the operating engineers. And so the next week I went to the Alfreda, which was the bookkeeper. After we got the paycheck, I said, the book says I should be making $4.50 an hour. She said, yeah, you're right, Alec, I'm sorry. She said, I'll make it up on the next check. Now, the shop guy didn't have to know anything about that. That's between me and Alfreda. I got my salary. So how long did
you work on that job?
I worked in that position, John. I don't know the exact time, but probably 2 years until they made me yard superintendent. and they put me in office in a trailer out in the yard, and I hired another, and allowed me to hire a guy to replace me as yard foreman.
Yes.
So I'm yard superintendent. I got my own phone and my company car, and company credit card. So I'm moving up in the world. And so then as I ran that job for 5 years as a yard superintendent, then they made me equipment superintendent. Now some of the same guys that called me washwoman is now working under my supervision. Now I have gained a higher position than them. They were still working, running cranes and end loaders. I worked in that position for the company for 46 years and 6 months.
Wow.
And gained a lot of recognition throughout the company, throughout the construction industry. And during that time, if you'll allow me, there was a material company that told me they wanted to hire me. They said, "We'd like to make you rich, Alec." During this time while I'm working in this position, the owner of the company, Kirk Becker, heard this from this guy. Said, "We want to open up a company in your name, your own company. We'll make you a rich man." And I said, "Well, can I let you know tomorrow?" And he said, "Yeah, let me know, but we want to get moving."
Sure.
So I left and I called Mr. Becker and I said, "You heard what the guy said tonight. What do you think?" He said, "Well, I don't want to lose you. You're like a brother to me. But he mean what he said. He's going to make you a rich man, but he's also going to own you." He said, "But you make the decision. I'm not going to make it for you."
Right.
So I called him the next day and I said to the guy's name was Jim. I said, "Jim, thank you for the offer. I am so grateful that you would think so highly of me, but I'm going to have to turn you down. Kirk's been very good to me. And I'm going to stick with him." He said, "Okay, well, you're the man we wanted, but if you choose not to, then so be it." And what I say, John, is in making that decision, all of the things that I had learned coming along that my daddy taught me, that your word is your bond, the responsibility that had been given to me, that if you want anything bad enough, you got to work for it.
Sure.
And during the time working for it, you may have to go through some stuff. And
Right.
you may have to be disrespected.
Right.
Stick with the truth. Stick with the truth and let your word be your bond and do what you're assigned to do.
When I hear that story, one of the things that really resonates for me is how Mr. Becker, as you called him, intervened in your behalf. I mean, early on, when you got that first promotion and guys were saying, "Well, hey, I'm not working for this guy." And he said something I think was very pivotal. He said, "Look, if they're going to work here, they're going to work for Alec." And I think that was very important because he, in a sense, stood in the gap for you, stood up for you.
He stood up for me. There was many other times, but I had to keep my word by doing the work and being the man that he took me to be.
Sure.
In order for him to not to be put himself in a bad position.
Sure.
Because he stood up for me, and I knew that no matter what, he would stand for me. If you had something to say bad about Alec, you need to say it to me.
We need people like that in our lives because obviously after 46 years of working there and reporting to either other people, but essentially it was, as you call him, Mr. Becker's company. You really cared for what you did and what he did for you. That really mattered. I appreciate that. And I have a question for you. I know you, I think, pretty well, and you're a man of integrity. And there's another part of telling the truth. You've already referred to that here, and being honest. There were a couple things that really transpired later on after the relationship with Mr. Becker's company, et cetera. Tell me about that, if you would.
Even during my later years in working, my religious life, my following Christ life. Now, early on, we always had to go to church, John, so Christ was nothing new to me, but there was a period when I didn't follow that particular leadership that my mother laid out for me. And a friend of mine kept after me to go to church, go to Bible study rather. It was on Wednesday night. And I said, man, I got no time for that. You see, by this time I'm riding motorcycle, Harley Davidson. I'm the president of the club. And so, all I could think about was riding that Harley on the weekend and going out of town. So finally, his name was Wes Calamise, and he's no longer with us, but I said, okay, I'm going to go with you, man, to get you to leave me alone. And so that Wednesday night, I went to Bible study with him. And while we were in Bible study, something happened to me. God moved into my spirit and I couldn't be still. They had to hold on to me. There was a round table of people there, ministers and elders. And man, there was something going on in my body that I couldn't control, and my mind. So that night, when they finally got me to got a hold of myself, I realized that something had changed in my life when I came home and talked to my wife, and sure, my thought process was different. My goals were different, and I wanted to be follow the Lord. In other words, that's what I wanted. So I joined the church. After I joined the church, I was made chairman of the board after working in the church for a while. I made chairman of the board in the church and was ordained as an elder in the First Church of God Christian Life Center in Evanston, where I gained a lot of status. I mean, people knew me. Me and the pastor traveled to California, went all around.
Sure.
But what happened, John, was, and I looked at him as a brother, my pastor. So here we get back to the truth telling. So it was discovered, we paid 10% of our tithes and offering to the mission fields. And he would tell us where to write the check to. International Ministry was called. But it was discovered after trying to find some receipts, get some receipts rather, from this international ministry. And he would always have an excuse why he didn't have the receipts. It was discovered that international ministry was created by him in Zionsville, Indiana. There was a bank account for him and a bank account for international ministries. And this was discovered, and I and a federal agent drove down one Saturday morning in my company car and discovered that he owned a home down there that his wife didn't know anything about, had these two bank accounts, and the federal agent was able to get this information. Now I've got this information. What are you going to do with it? That's your friend, that's your pastor. I went to him and he denied it. And I said, well, I had a file by this time. And I told him, I love you, man, but I'm not going to lie for you. I came to serve the Lord, and that's what I intend to do. And you know that what you're doing is wrong. And so therefore, I was forced to stand against my friend, my pastor.
Right.
And there were times when I had to stand alone. I called a church meeting on Sunday night. It was explaining to the congregation what was going on. And I had a person come down the aisle and snatch the mic out of my hand and tell me that we don't care what he did or what our pastor did. We want him back in the pulpit.
So in a sense, you're saying you did go to him with the information that you had collected with this federal agent. You, in a sense, conveyed to him what you'd found and told him the details of what you'd found, and he denied that.
Exactly.
And then on the heels of that, I mean, this is a person that you had gotten to know. You considered him not only your pastor, but a friend you had traveled with and such. And then you felt it was your obligation to go before the church and tell them the details of what your discovery was.
Exactly.
And someone comes down the aisle, grabs the mic and says, we don't care what he's done. We still want him to be the pastor and to preach here.
Exactly.
Is that right?
That's what happened.
Oh, man.
That's
How did that make you feel?
Not very good. I knew at that time you are facing some danger. Matter of fact, I even had a man come to my house after that Sunday night and tell me that I'd better step down from what I was doing because anybody that got in the way of a pastor at First Church of God Christian Life Center, their life could be in danger.
These are church folks we're talking about here.
These are church folk. Came to 3328 Crane. I was cutting the grass and threatened my life if I didn't quit what I was doing. But I didn't quit. I told him, I said, well, now you can run and tell this. I'm not stopping until it's closed, until it's done.
Right.
You go relay that message. Okay. I credit my early responsibility given to me by my father, where I had to deal with a lot of very prejudiced people in Mississippi, merchants, that we had to deal with, the sorghum mills, the cotton gins. I dealt with a lot of people that didn't think much of me as a man, but I dealt with them because I had a responsibility to my family and to myself, of course. So during this period of time, I realized that if you want anything bad enough, you got to give it 100%.
Right.
And tell the truth, even sometimes if it hurts.
Right.
And I say today to anyone, if you're not willing to give yourself for the truth, because God is truth, and if you go to serve him, you got to be ready to deal with whatever the enemy puts in the front of you to do his work,
Right.
work. And so my earlier experience as a child that my father put me in helped me to be who I am today.
Well, it's interesting, Alec, when I hear you detail your life in Mississippi, being born to your mom and dad and having early on responsibility, and then how that translated to your life as you moved to Evanston in high school, and then the 46 years you worked for that the company, and the relationship you had with Mr. Beck and such, and then how this spiritual connection really started, and then having to really confront a wrongdoing, a significant wrongdoing in a church setting. I mean, it's a very, very compelling tale from my standpoint. And when you told me some of the details of it before, I was just awestruck. And I guess the question I would ask you, Alec, is that you have an opportunity, if you have an opportunity to share what was hugely significant to you about your story and the benefit that would be to anyone else, to others, what do you think you'd say?
Be true to yourself and who you are. And I believe with all my heart that God put me here on this earth to accomplish a certain mission. And sometimes I don't know what that is, but he knows, and I depend on him for that answer. So
Sure.
by me being obedient to what was set in front of me, even the farm, and then at K-Sun Corporation, and then at the church, it was always favor given to me. And even today, as a crossing guard, there is favor continuously set before me. I had a guy, his wife that died a while ago, and his wife called me, and I didn't have no clue. He lived out southwest of Chicago. She said, my husband died. His name was Leo Stitt, and he had left word in his wishes that you do his eulogy. Now, this was a white friend of mine, and once again, I didn't have a clue, but he had chosen me. Now that's favor over all of the people that he knew and his wife's pastor, and that he wanted me to be the one to stand before his family and the congregation. That's favor.
Sure.
You came to my birthday party, my 80th birthday party up in Wilmette that they threw for me.
Yeah.
That day, a lady from CNN asked me, said, Mr. Childress, said, what do you attribute all of this love that's poured out for you? I said, it's called favor. I'm not perfect, and I haven't always done everything right, but God is perfect. And he was looking as I come along in life, and he gave me favor with people who would help me along my life. So I say to anybody that this life is not easy, but tell the truth and stick to your obligations in the righteous way, because the crowd ain't always right.
Yeah. Well, Alec, I have to tell you, man, it has been a joy and a pleasure talking with you, and your story is an amazing one. And I thank you for sharing it with me. I will likely ask you to come back and share some other features of the Alec Childress story. But for now, thank you, my friend. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome, John. God bless you, and thank you for including me.
You bet. Well, listen, have a great day, and we will talk soon.
We look forward to it.
All right.
Okay.
Bye now.